April 17th, 2023, Toronto, Canada. $24 million in gold, 6,600 bars, stolen in broad daylight. And the craziest part? Nobody broke in. Nobody used a weapon. A man drove a truck to the warehouse, handed over a fake piece of paper, and an airport worker loaded the gold onto his truck with a forklift. The entire heist took less than 30 minutes. No alarms, no guns, no masks. Just a forged shipping document printed on a printer inside the building. But this isn't just a story about stolen gold. It's about two Air Canada insiders who betrayed their employer. A handwritten list that showed exactly where $10 million went. And a getaway driver who was caught 5 months later with 65 illegal firearms in the trunk of his rental car. The mastermind fled to Dubai the day after the robbery. He stayed free for almost 3 years. Then he flew back to the same airport where he stole the gold, and the police were waiting. This is how the largest gold heist in Canadian history, the 6th largest in the world, fell apart because the criminals couldn't keep quiet. Arsalan Chaudhary grew up in Mississauga, Ontario, a suburb west of Toronto. By his early 40s, he had connections across the Greater Toronto area and beyond. He wasn't a career criminal. He wasn't on any law enforcement radar. He was, by all outward appearances, an ordinary man living an ordinary life in one of Canada's most diverse suburban communities. But Chaudhary had ambition and a network. He knew people across different worlds, business owners, workers, people who moved between countries regularly. When the opportunity came to steal a fortune in gold, he didn't hesitate. He became, in the words of one suspect, the top dog. The scheme required insiders, people who worked at Toronto Pearson International Airport, one of the busiest airports in North America. People who knew how the cargo system worked from the inside. People who understood where the gaps in security were. And most importantly, people willing to exploit them. How do you find someone willing to betray a major airline for a share of $24 million? Chaudhary found two. The first was Simran Preet Panesar, a 31-year-old manager at Air Canada Cargo. Panesar had worked his way up through the company. He had access to the warehouse systems. He knew the procedures. He knew which shipments were coming and when. And critically, he had access to a printer inside the Air Canada facility. A printer that could produce the one document needed to walk out with a fortune. The second insider was Parmpal Sidhu, a 54-year-old Air Canada employee who had worked at the airport for years. Sidhu was a well-known figure in the Brampton community. He organized concerts and cultural events. He worked with local police on community safety. He was the last person anyone would suspect. But what would push two airline employees to risk everything? Panesar's wife had dreams of becoming a star in the Punjabi entertainment industry. Panesar was ambitious for her. He wanted to fund her career, introduce her to producers, make things happen. But an Air Canada cargo manager's salary only goes so far. Sidhu, on the other hand, had been around the entertainment world for decades. He had been organizing Punjabi music concerts and cultural shows since he was 17 years old. He knew producers, he knew artists, he knew the business, and he knew Panesar. The two men worked in the same facility. Panesar was a manager. Sidhu was a veteran employee. Their professional relationship gave them the trust and access the heist required. But did they fully understand what they were getting into? The outsiders completed the crew. Archit Grover, a 36-year-old from Brampton, owned the 5-ton truck that would be used in the heist. He was a longtime friend of Sidhu. Grover's cousin, Amit Jalota, was 40 years old and from Oakville. Together, they would handle the gold after it was stolen. Then there was the driver, Durante King McLean, a 27-year-old from Brampton. His job was simple: drive to the warehouse, pick up the gold, drive away. And Ali Raza, a 37-year-old jewelry store owner from Toronto. His basement would become the place where $24 million in stolen gold was melted down and turned into crude bracelets. 6 men with one plan: get the gold, melt it, sell it, disappear. Could it really be that simple? Toronto Pearson International Airport processes over 50 million passengers a year. But beneath the terminals, away from the check-in counters and departure gates, there is another world entirely: the cargo facilities. Air Canada's cargo warehouse sat on the airport's perimeter, outside the primary security line. It handled everything from mail to medical supplies to high-value shipments. Containers arrived from all over the world and were stored temporarily before being picked up by their intended recipients. The security was basic. A driver would arrive at the loading dock, present an airway bill, a standard shipping document, and a warehouse attendant would locate the corresponding container and load it onto the truck. No ID verification against the airway bill. No secondary confirmation with the shipper. No armed guards, just a piece of paper and a forklift. For most shipments, this system worked fine. But for a container holding 400 kilograms of pure gold, it was a disaster waiting to happen. Consider this. In the same city, stolen cars were being shipped to Africa by the thousands. Tens of thousands of vehicles vanishing from Canadian streets and ending up in Nigeria, Ghana, and the Middle East. The ports and airports of the Greater Toronto Area had become a pipeline for organized crime, and nobody seemed able to stop it. If a 4,000-pound Range Rover could leave the country without anyone noticing, why not 880 pounds of gold? The cargo facility operated around the clock. Trucks came and went constantly. Drivers picked up shipments at all hours. In the chaos of daily operations, one more truck pulling up to one more loading dock was invisible. What would happen if someone figured out how easy it was? And what if that someone already worked inside the building? The plan came together in early April 2023. Panesar, the Air Canada cargo manager, had access to the warehouse computer system. He could see incoming shipments, he could see their values, and he could see the airway bills associated with each one. In mid-April, a shipment was arranged from Switzerland to Toronto. Two Swiss companies, Valcambi, a precious metals refinery, and Raiffeisen Schweiz, a retail bank, contracted with Brink Switzerland to transport their cargo. Valcambi was shipping 6,600 gold bars, weighing a total of 400 kilograms, to the Toronto Dominion Bank. The gold was 99.9% pure. Each bar had an individualized serial number. Raiffeisen was shipping foreign currency worth roughly $2. $7 million to the Vancouver Bullion and Currency Exchange. Brinks arranged with Air Canada to fly everything in one container from Zurich to Toronto. The container was small, less than half a square meter, but inside it sat a fortune. Panesar knew the shipment was coming. He shared this information with the crew, and then he did something that would make the entire heist possible. He printed a duplicate of a legitimate airway bill, one that had been used the previous day for a container of seafood, from a printer inside the Air Canada facility. The original airway bill had been used on April 16th for a routine seafood delivery. It was a real document for a real shipment that had already been completed. Panesar simply reprinted it, same format, same codes, same layout. The only difference was the date. An airway bill is supposed to be a secure document. It's the key that unlocks the warehouse. But at Air Canada Cargo, any employee with access to the system could print one. There was no two-factor authentication, no manager approval required, no log that flagged duplicate prints. A piece of paper, that was the key to $24 million. How did a company trusted with billions of dollars in cargo every year fail to protect a single piece of paper? The plan was set. The airway bill was ready. The truck was waiting. Everything depended on one thing. Could a man walk into a warehouse with a fake document and walk out with 6,600 bars of gold? Think about that. No weapons, no violence, just paperwork. Drop your prediction in the comments and subscribe, because what happens next is beyond anything these criminals expected. April 17th, 2023, a Monday. Air Canada Flight 881 departed Zurich on schedule. A Boeing 777 carrying over 300 passengers, and in the cargo hold, a small container holding $24 million in gold and $2.7 million in foreign currency. 3:56 p.m. Eastern Time. The plane touched down at Toronto Pearson International Airport. The container was offloaded from the aircraft and transported to the Air Canada cargo facility on the airport's perimeter. It was placed in the warehouse. 6:32 p.m. A white 5-ton truck pulled up to the loading dock. The driver stepped out, Durante King McLean. He walked into the warehouse carrying the fraudulent airway bill, the one printed inside the building, the one that matched a seafood shipment from the day before. He handed it to the warehouse attendant. Did the attendant look at the document carefully? Did anything seem wrong? Nothing. The airway bill looked legitimate. It had all the right details, the right format, the right codes. A short time later, a forklift arrived. The operator loaded the container of gold and foreign currency into the rear of King McLean's truck. King McLean got behind the wheel and drove away. No alarms went off. No one called security. Nobody realized that $24 million in gold had just rolled out the door on a forklift. Think about that for a moment. One of the most valuable shipments ever to pass through a Canadian airport, guarded by nothing more than a single piece of paper. And a man just drove away with it. 6:45 p.m. The truck turned onto Dixon Road, then west on Highway 401, Canada's busiest highway. Rush hour traffic. Just another white truck in a sea of vehicles. What if someone had checked the airway bill against the original? What if someone had called Brinks to confirm the pickup? The entire heist would have collapsed in seconds, but nobody did. Meanwhile, Arsalan Chaudhry was stationed in Mississauga, roughly 5 kilometers from the Air Canada warehouse. He was tracking the operation. On the day of the heist, Chaudhry exchanged calls or messages with 2 other suspects 772 times. 772 times, in one day. The truck continued west on Highway 401 into Halton Region. It passed James Snow Parkway, then exited at Bronte Road and turned north, heading toward Milton. The road became rural, farms, golf courses, an apple orchard, and then, as the truck moved deeper into the countryside, it disappeared. Police would later canvass 225 homes and businesses along the route, reviewing 4 weeks of security footage. They tracked the truck for 30 minutes from the airport. Then, it vanished into the twilight. 9:30 p.m., 3 hours later, a Brinks Canada truck arrived at the Air Canada cargo facility to pick up the gold shipment. The Brinks guards walked into the warehouse, expecting a routine handoff. They presented their documentation. They asked for the container from Zurich. The container wasn't there. Air Canada employees searched the warehouse. They checked every corner, every dock, every storage area. Nothing. They launched an internal investigation. For hours, they searched for answers. They reviewed logs. They checked records. They couldn't explain where the container had gone. 2:43 a.m. on April 18th. Almost 8 hours after the gold left the building, Peel Regional Police received a call. The gold was gone. For the criminals, the hard part was over, or so they thought. They had pulled off something that law enforcement experts said was nearly impossible. No violence, no weapons, no confrontation, just a clean, surgical removal of $24 million in gold from one of Canada's biggest airports. For the first few days, the crew was euphoric. They had beaten the system. They had outsmarted an international airline, a global security company, and an entire airport. The gold was in their hands. The police had nothing. But euphoria makes people careless, and careless people leave evidence. The gold was taken to a drop-off point, where Chaudhry met King McLean and took possession. Then the plan shifted to phase 2. Melt the gold, destroy the serial numbers, turn 6,600 identifiable bars into untraceable metal. Ali Raza's jewelry store in Mississauga became the smelting operation. In the basement, using smelting pots, casts, and molds, they melted down the bars and reshaped them into crude gold bracelets. The bracelets lacked the hallmarks and craftsmanship of fine jewelry. They were rough, unpolished, but they were pure gold. And pure gold is pure gold, regardless of what shape it takes. 6 bracelets were later recovered by police, worth over $89,000 total. But those 6 bracelets represented a tiny fraction of the 400 kilograms stolen. The rest was melted, reshaped, and pushed into local and international markets. Once the serial numbers were destroyed, the gold became untraceable. It could have gone anywhere: Dubai, India, Pakistan, or it could still be sitting in basements and safe deposit boxes across the greater Toronto area. What do you do with $24 million in stolen gold? You can't deposit it in a bank. You can't walk into a dealer and sell 400 kilograms without raising questions. The answer was simple but time-consuming. Melt it, reshape it, sell it in small quantities across multiple markets, and keep meticulous records of who got what. The day after the heist, A suspect sent Chowdhury a WhatsApp message. "I'm so happy for you, bro. I can't even sleep." Chowdhury's response? "It's insane." What happens when criminals start celebrating before they've gotten away with it? Chowdhury kept a handwritten list in his apartment, a debt list. It detailed how $10.3 million would be distributed. $5 million to an unidentified group, $1 million to the boss, $250,000 for a condo, $200,000 to someone named Tommy, smaller amounts for trips, supplies, and personal items. This piece of paper, sitting in his apartment, was a confession written in his own handwriting. But Chowdhury didn't stick around to see what would happen. Within days of the heist, he fled to Dubai. The United Arab Emirates had no extradition treaty with Canada. It was a safe haven for fugitives who had the money to disappear. Banissar, the Air Canada manager, gave Peel police a tour of the cargo facility before he became a suspect. He walked investigators through the warehouse, showed them how the system worked, and answered their questions. Then, in the summer of 2023, he resigned from Air Canada and booked a flight to India. Other suspects scattered across the globe. Ali Raza traveled to Pakistan, claiming it was for his father's medical treatment. Archit Grover went to India. Prasath Paramalingam crossed the border into the United States. Ahmad Chowdhury, a separate suspect with the same surname, remained in Canada. Within weeks of the heist, half the crew had left the country. They used their passports freely. No travel bans had been issued. No charges had been filed. The police were still trying to figure out what happened. The gold was melting, the suspects were running, and the police were just getting started. On April 20th, 2023, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police confirmed that Peel Regional Police would lead the investigation. They called it Project 24 Carat. The first thing investigators did was pull security footage. Starting at the Air Canada cargo facility, they worked outward, door to door, business to business. They reviewed surveillance cameras from every building along the truck's route. The video canvas took 4 weeks and covered 225 separate locations across the Peel and Halton regions. They pieced together the truck's path: westbound on Britannia Road East, southbound on Dixie Road, westbound on Highway 401. They checked every exit: Airway Mills Parkway, Winston Churchill Boulevard, Trafalgar Road. The truck didn't stop at any of them. It continued past James Snow Parkway, exited at Bronte Road, and headed north toward Milton. The landscape shifted from suburban sprawl to farmland, and then the cameras ran out. North of Milton, the truck vanished into the rural darkness. Where did 400 kilograms of gold go on a country road outside Toronto? That question haunted investigators for months. But the biggest break came not from Canadian investigators. It came from a routine traffic stop on a Pennsylvania highway. September 2023, 5 months after the heist, Durante King McLean, the driver of the getaway truck, was pulled over by Pennsylvania State Police near Chambersburg. He was in a rental car. He was in the United States illegally, and he had no idea that his name was already in law enforcement databases linked to the Pearson heist. When the trooper approached the vehicle, King McLean panicked. He jumped out and ran. A brief foot chase through the rural Pennsylvania landscape ended with his arrest. And when police searched the rental car, they found 65 illegal firearms, handguns, rifles, 65 weapons stacked in the trunk of a rental vehicle driven by a Canadian fugitive on a rural American highway. 65 guns in the trunk, destined for Canada. The ATF ran King McLean's name through their databases. The alert came back immediately. Peel Regional Police in Canada wanted to talk to this man about a missing shipment of gold. What was the connection between a gold heist at a Canadian airport and a trunkload of illegal weapons in rural Pennsylvania? Peel Regional Police and the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives began working together. The investigation revealed that several members of the gold heist crew were also involved in firearms trafficking. The gold wasn't just about getting rich. It was about funding a gun-smuggling pipeline into Canada. The connection stunned investigators. A gold heist at a Canadian airport, firearms trafficking across an international border. Two seemingly unrelated crimes tied together by the same group of people. The ATF confirmed that the 65 weapons were destined for the streets of the Greater Toronto Area. Prasath Paramalingam, another member of the crew, was accused of providing money to King McLean to purchase the guns. He was charged by both Canadian and American authorities, but Paramalingam vanished. He failed to appear in court in August 2024, and a bench warrant was issued. How many other crimes were connected to the Pearson gold heist? And how deep did this network really go? King McLean was held in U.S. custody on firearms charges. He later struck a plea bargain, facing up to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of serving time in Canada. He would be permanently barred from entering the United States. Over the next year, Project 24 Carat investigators executed 37 search warrants and 70 production orders. They interviewed over 50 individuals. They seized 430,000 Canadian dollars in Canadian cash, the 6 gold bracelets, smelting equipment, and the 2 handwritten debt lists. On April 17, 2024, exactly 1 year after the heist, Peel Regional Police held a massive press conference. 9 suspects were named. 6 had been arrested. 3 had warrants issued for their arrest. The Peel Regional Police Chief stood in front of the seized white truck and told reporters this story belonged in a Netflix series. Behind him sat the evidence: smelting pots, gold bracelets, debt lists, the fraudulent airway bill, a case built piece by piece over 12 months. Among those arrested was Archit Grover. He had fled to India after the heist. But on May 20th, 2024, he made the mistake of flying back through Pearson Airport. Peel police were waiting when he stepped off the plane. The same airport, the same terminal. The irony was hard to miss. But 2 suspects remained free. Panesar, the Air Canada manager, was believed to be in India. An extradition request was submitted. Chaudhry, the alleged mastermind, was in Dubai, beyond the immediate reach of Canadian law enforcement. Remember that handwritten debt list? The one sitting in Chaudhry's apartment? That single piece of paper connected him to the entire operation. It showed names, amounts, and allocations. It was the kind of evidence that prosecutors dream about. Could they stay hidden forever? Or would they eventually have to come home? January 12th, 2026, nearly 3 years after the heist. Arsalan Chaudhry boarded a flight from Dubai to Toronto. He had arranged through his lawyers to surrender, but Peel Regional Police weren't taking chances. Officers were waiting at the gate. Chaudhry was arrested at Toronto Pearson International Airport, the same airport where the gold was stolen, the same terminal where the cargo had arrived from Zurich. He was charged with theft over $5,000, 2 counts of possession of property obtained by crime, and conspiracy to commit an indictable offense. Why did he come back? After almost 3 years of freedom in Dubai, why would the alleged mastermind voluntarily walk into the arms of the police? His lawyers negotiated the surrender. Perhaps he calculated that running forever was not an option. Perhaps he believed a guilty plea would bring a lighter sentence. Perhaps he simply wanted it to be over. In March 2026, Chaudhry stood in a Brampton courtroom. He waived his right to a trial and pleaded guilty to theft over $5,000. The Crown prosecutor described the handwritten debt list in detail. $10.3 million, allocated across associates, property, and personal expenses. Prosecutors asked for 7 years. The defense argued for 4, citing his early guilty plea. Sentencing was expected the following month, but the question remained: where was the rest of the gold? The Pearson Airport gold heist was the largest in Canadian history, the 6th largest in the world, and it was pulled off with a forged piece of paper, a forklift, and a 5-ton truck. No guns, no masks, no explosions. Just an insider with a printer and a crew willing to gamble everything on a system with almost no security. The heist exposed vulnerabilities that nobody wanted to talk about. Air Canada's cargo facility processed billions of dollars in shipments every year, yet the system for releasing high-value cargo relied on a single document that could be duplicated by anyone with access to a printer. There were no biometric checks, no live verification with the shipping company, no secondary authorization for shipments above a certain value. After the heist, everything changed. Air Canada overhauled its cargo security procedures. Brinks filed a lawsuit against the airline on April 27, 2023, just 10 days after the theft, demanding full reimbursement for the stolen goods. Air Canada rejected the claim and denied what Brinks called careless conduct. The legal battle dragged on for months. Both companies blamed the other for the security failure. Meanwhile, the gold was long gone. The Greater Toronto Airport Authority pointed out that the cargo facility sat outside the airport's primary security perimeter, a detail that raised uncomfortable questions about who was ultimately responsible for protecting the gold. The facility was on land leased from the airport authority, but operated entirely by Air Canada. The security protocols were Air Canada's responsibility, and those protocols had failed spectacularly. Police recovered roughly 1 kilogram of gold out of 400 kilograms stolen. That means 399 kilograms, worth tens of millions of dollars at current market prices, has never been found. The gold price has nearly doubled since the heist. What was worth $24 million in April 2023 could be worth over $40 million today. The debt lists suggest the gold was melted, sold, and distributed. But where the money ultimately went remains one of Canada's biggest unsolved mysteries. To this day, 2 suspects remain at large. Panesar is believed to be in India, where an extradition request sits pending. Paramalingam failed to appear in court and vanished. Warrants remain active for both men. The Peel Regional Police Chief said it best: "No matter where you try to run or hide, we will find you." But the gold? That's another story entirely. $24 million in pure gold, melted down in a jewelry store basement, scattered across unknown markets, possibly sitting in safe deposit boxes from Toronto to Dubai. Gone. The heist proves something that security experts had warned about for years. The most dangerous vulnerability in any system isn't a locked door or an alarm. It's a trusted employee with the wrong intentions. And that brings us to the end of our story. If you liked it, don't forget to like and subscribe and activate the bell button so you can receive new videos.